Wonderful. So, thank you very much. It's great to be here. It's when Greg says, how long have you been doing this? It's that sort of slightly weird knee-jerk moment when you go, it's been 22 years since I started trying to work out what it means to reach academics. And so we've got our banner here, right? Change the campus, change the world. This is awesome. So this is part 3 of our sort of back to school series. So part 1, Uno gave an awesome talk, an awesome encouragement impartation to us. Just really underscored the importance of school kids. Part 2 last week, Mark gave an awesome talk to us on reaching students on campus, and this is really, really, really important. If you've been around Every Nation for any length of time at all, you will understand we have a passion for the campus, and we have a passion for students. Part 3 of this series, if we reach, for those of you who were here last year, remember last year's talk, if we reached every single student on the campus, we would reach about half the campus. If we reached and saved and discipled every single student on every single university in Wales, we'd be about halfway there. The other half of the campus that we often don't think about is the academics. And so it is my privilege and joy today to speak to you about the academics. Now, one of the problems we have with thinking about academics is thinking about them. When we think about when we think about school kids, right, we all know about school kids. Almost all of us were a school child at some point. We've been through school. We know, if we can sort of remember back, how school kids tick, what their problems are, what their concerns are. We see school kids running around on the bus or to and from school, right? We've got a picture of what they're like. And that picture is more or less accurate, give or take a bit, right? For students, not all of us went to university, but a lot of us went to university. We've got an experience of what it's like to be a student. We kind of know what motivates students. As little lecture time as possible and as much free pizza, right? We've got a picture, even if we've not been to university, we've kind of seen movies, or we've got friends that are students, or like we've hung out with students around church. We've kind of got a picture of it, and that picture is not completely off. It's not maybe perfect, but it's a reasonable idea of what it is that students are like. Now, academics, what drives an academic? What are academics like? What are their interests? What are their hopes? What are their fears? How can academics be plugged into the church, discipled, and build God's kingdom? What is it where they really, really offer something for the kingdom? And that's a harder question, because we don't really have a very good picture often of academics. And it's not necessarily our fault, right? If you look at, because most people haven't been an academic, maybe our contact to academics is, well, we've seen them in movies. Right? I could have picked a lot more movies here. These are just like the first ones that came up on my IMDb list of movies with academics in. And really nice guy, but completely bonkers. Played for laughs. I won't point to which movies for spoilers, but among these you have dies, kills his students. The student's success is realized when the professor finally steps back and stops trying to be overbearing on a student. Blows up entire cities at the push of a button. Right? When we look at the way academics are presented, someone comes to you and says, hello, I'm a professor of liberal, feminist, genderqueer studies. And you go, do we have a place for you in our church? Can we have a place for you in our church before you abandon your academic career and become like a proper Christian? We struggle with this because we don't have a good picture of what academics are like. And sorry to say, the way we read our Bible doesn't help. So let's try and understand academics through Bible stories. Who can tell me? Right? Okay, well, let's start with the easy ones, right? Can you think of a Bible story that involves children? Just wave at me if you can. Yes, okay. Bible story involving children. Wonderful. We have a picture in the Bible of a child who comes to Jesus and offers the little bit that we have. And we have sermons on this. Bring the little children to me. Wonderful. Can we have a Bible story about sick people? Anyone know a Bible story about someone who is sick? Right, okay. Give me a Bible story about a sick person. Healing the leper. Healing the lame man, healing the blind man. If someone says, okay, I want to work with people who are sick, we have a biblical picture of how Christianity engages with sick people. So politicians were mentioned earlier. Rulers, anyone think of a Bible story involving politicians, rulers, people? Wave at me if you can. Hey, think of a ruler. Wonderful. Okay, so we know at least one ruler that we interact with. We have rulers who are against God's people, like Pharaoh. We have rulers who are for God's people, like David. We have rulers who have this really complicated relationship with God's people, like Nebuchadnezzar, who flattened God's people because God wanted him to. Right? But rulers, we can do this. We've got biblical pictures. Right? And I could go through list after list after list, right? We can do prophets if someone says, I'm a preacher or I'm a prophet, right? We've got a picture of that. Prostitutes. We have biblical pictures for how Christians engage with prostitution. Demon possession, shepherds, dead people, right? We've got all of these biblical stories we can pull on. And if we say, right, now, a biblical story about academics. Hey, wonderful, yes. There exist Bible stories about academics. They do exist. But often we don't tell them, and sometimes when we do tell them, we don't tell them like they're Bible stories about academics. So here we go. Today, I'm going to tell academic Bible stories. Now, this here, as much as anything, when I was preparing this, I'm like, okay, what am I trying to do here? What's the shape of what I'm doing, right? Do I pick out a verse and carefully exegete what I'm doing? Do I want to bring stats and numbers? And I thought, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to tell a story. This is a story that you know. It's a story, probably, possibly. It may well be a story that you've heard before. But I want to tell it just again. So that next time when you say, okay, I know how a Bible story of how the church engages with sinners and tax collectors and prostitutes and kings and demon possession and the poor and the rich and academics. Now, one of the problems is, Daniel, what? Yes. Okay, when we tell the stories of Daniel, right, what stories do we tell about Daniel? Daniel and the lion's den, yay! Give me another story that turns up in Daniel.
Well, it's not a story that you said Daniel's fast.
There we go, Daniel diet. I like the way not only that you're thinking of the same things as me, but in the same order. This makes my slides easier. Yes, so we think of Daniel's diet right at the beginning of Daniel where he says vegetables and water only. Other stories turn up in the book of Daniel. Hey, yes. We sung about it this morning. You've been my fourth man in the fire. Here we go. Right? So this is what we think. Any other stories that turn up in Daniel that you may have heard preached on? Right. What's a story that goes with that? And this is the trick. It's like, yes, they were gifted interpreting dreams, so he was good at interpreting things. So here we have the writing on the wall. Okay, these are the stories we tell about Daniel. They're exciting stories. They're God-filled, Spirit-filled, kingdom-building, amazing stories. But they don't scream out at you academic. So today, I'm going to tell the bits of the story in between these stories. And today's reading is Daniel 1-4. So strap yourself in. There's going to be a lot of reading. It's going to be a little bit different from the way sermons are often presented. We're going to go through, get a feel of the story of Daniel 1 to 4. Chapter 1 sets out Daniel's academic training. And Daniel's academic training was remarkably similar to a modern day academic training. In the 3rd year of the reign of King Jehoiakim of Judah, King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon advanced against Jerusalem and laid it under siege. Now the Lord delivered King Jehoiakim of Judah into his power, along with some of the vessels of the temple of God. He brought them to the land of Babylonia, to the temple of his God, and put the vessels in the treasury of his God. Now you look at me and you go, Mike, what bit of academia is that like? Okay, here's the trick. When we look at the university, we're often concerned by the university because it seems secular, unchristian, anti-Christian. We say, is it really a good place to be going? Is it really a good place to hang out? Because the people here, the people that I am putting myself under their authority, the people with whom I have to work, the people with whom I have to engage, whose thoughts I have to think, are not Christians. Am I okay with that? Well, this is where Daniel went. The king came, sacked God's people, took the precious materials from the temple and put it in his own temple to his own God. Daniel was not in a nice Christian seminary. People say, okay, I can only go to an institution that has a statement of faith, because if it's not like a Christian college, like what are they going to expect me to do and believe? Well, Daniel ends up here. And the king commanded Ashpenaz, who was in charge of his court officials, to choose some of the Israelites who were well-educated, having keen insight, and who were capable of entering the king's royal service, and to teach them the literature and the language of the Babylonians. Among these young men were some from Judah: Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. For what it's worth, for those of you who are like, some of these names I don't recognize, these three you know better as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego when they turn up later in the fire. So the first thing to notice, or a thing to notice, is their identity is taken away from them. When you go to university, you are expected to adopt a certain identity. I am a scientist. I have to wear a lab coat. I have to wear sandals and socks. I have to speak in a particular way. If someone goes off to university and comes back a couple of years later, they have changed. The way they speak, the way they think, the way they interact changes. The academy expects you to change your identity. Okay, we're going to go for this one, right? When I grew up, when I was a kid in East London, I used to talk like this. And I grew up, my mum didn't understand what I was saying. I talked far too fast, dropped off my letters. But this is how I talked, because this is what you talk like when you live in East End London. Now, I didn't last very long talking like that in the academy. Right? The academy changes our identity. So one of the things when you're thinking about academics, one of their concerns, maybe they haven't even noticed it, is the academy changes your identity. And this happened to all four of these guys. And they live with this dual identity of where they were from, but they're taken out of where they're from their hometown, from their home country, from their home culture. And now they're straddling two identities. This is something that Daniel wrestled with. And this is something which academics wrestle with. Now, another one we can notice, they have keen insight. There is some innate thing, but also they are well educated. The Bible doesn't worry about nature or nurture. It says that we have these multiple things going on. People go, oh, you're smart, you go to university. Well, there's this connection between, is it innate smarts? Is it being honed? Is it the diligence of just going to lectures day after day, of doing the research? Is it this mix of all of them? And this is something that we do. Teaching them the literature of the Babylonians and the language of the Babylonians. So first of all, often we look at universities and we say, if you're doing medicine, that's an important subject. If you're doing literary history, shouldn't you be like doing something useful, anything useful, feeding the poor, going to Africa to dig wells? Why are you studying, a professor of literary history? The literature and the culture and the language of the Babylonians. And this was important. We need to esteem academic topics. even if we ourselves don't necessarily recognize why they're important, at least have the grace to say it might be important and I don't understand why. If you want to push and say, can you tell me why that's important? Feel free. Any academic would love to tell you why their topic is important because they believe it is. Now, as for these 4 young men, God endowed them with knowledge and skill in all sorts of literature and wisdom, and Daniel had insight into all kinds of visions and dreams. Okay? Now again, we like to separate out. There's this stuff that you learn at university, there's this stuff that you do in your research, and there's this stuff that's like Christian God stuff. Right? Is this knowledge that you got from God, or is this knowledge that you got from reading academic papers? And the Bible doesn't seem to bother about drawing a clear distinction of that. God endowed them with knowledge and skill. They spent 3 years reading up, and God endowed them with knowledge. Did they get that knowledge from God or from the academic papers they were reading? Or do we not need to ask that question? When you walk as an academic, each day you, hopefully, if you don't do this, you can, it's awesome, pray over the papers that you're reading. As you pray over your Bible and say, God, reveal to me what you're saying to me in my Bible, it is not sacrilegious to say, I'm reading this paper, God, show me what you want me to learn. We don't need to draw this distinction between that which God tells us and that which we learn from our research. And when the king spoke to them, he did not find any among the entire group, he did not find among the entire group, big group of people he'd taken, anyone like Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, or Azariah. So they entered the king's service. In every matter of wisdom and insight the king asked them about, he found them to be 10 times better than any of the magicians and astrologers that were in the entire empire. Now, for what it's worth, this isn't because they were put against a whole load of kooks, and of course they were sensible and they thought good thoughts and astrology is bunkum, right? They were trained as astrologers. This was their training. It was the Babylonian literature. The Babylonian literature was not good, sound biblical doctrine. The Babylonian literature they were trained in was astrology and magic. So when your professor friend comes to you and said they do feminist gender studies, and you go, really? Right? However bad and weird and kooky you think, and liberal and anti-Christian you think their professorship title is, it's not as bad as magician and astrologer. Daniel's actual full title that we would come to if we reach chapter 5, is chief of the magicians, astrologers, diviners, and wise men. Right? There is no professor that you've ever met who has a weirder job title than that. When you look at that thing, go, how can you, a Christian, head up a group doing this? We're going to come to why it's really important that Daniel does head up this group, but he is in their culture, and he straddles their culture with 1 foot in his identity as a Hebrew and 1 foot in his identity as a Babylonian academic. Chapter 2. Here we go. The life of an academic. So he's trained, he's now better than everyone else. Good. In the 2nd year of his reign, Nebuchadnezzar had many dreams. His mind was disturbed and he suffered insomnia. The king issued an order to summon the magicians, astrologers, sorcerers, and wise men in order to explain his dreams to him. Now, on the understanding that by modern equivalents, these magicians, astrologers, sorcerers, and wise men, these are basically the academics. This is an important lesson. When the ruler of your country has a problem and is disturbed, he does not, for many countries and many rulers, take to Twitter. He doesn't look at online polls. He doesn't look at people who've written an online petition. He calls up the academics, right? So when your politician is concerned about Israel and Gaza, or what AI is doing to our understanding of Israel and Gaza, or social care crises, or realizing that it's not just social care, but actually the entire social system is in crisis, or the problems we have with education, or self-doubt among adults, right? There are enough things, and this, 2 hours ago, 9 hours ago, 20, these are all news stories published like in one day last week. I was preparing this, I'm like, okay, what's going on in the news? This. This is what's on a politician's plate. When they are disturbed and finding problems sleeping, what they do is they call out to an academic. Because politicians are busy running a country, they don't have time to think hard for years and years and years about why it is that new fathers might be killing themselves. They're busy running a country. They don't have time to think about that. And if they did, they'd be so busy thinking about this, they wouldn't have time to think about how to get kids succeeding in education. So what they do is they call an academic and they say, you have been thinking for the last 20 years about social crises in housing. Tell me what to do. And with Daniel, this is no different. I have a problem. I have a concern. I don't know how to interpret dreams. Tell me what to do. And the wise men replied to the king, what the king is asking is too difficult. You want kids to succeed at school. We don't know how to make that happen. Often, the academics don't have all the answers, and the politicians still ask them. What the king is asking is too difficult. No one who exists can disclose to the king, except for the gods, but they don't live among men. Because of this, the king got furiously angry and gave orders to destroy all the wise men of Babylon. Now, fortunately, most countries today do not take this approach to academics. Within the last 100 years, some countries do. I have colleagues who lived through various purges in various countries. When I was in Hong Kong, we were celebrating a Chinese academic's birthday, an older Chinese academic. And he said, there aren't many of my colleagues whose birthdays we can celebrate who are my age, because not many of them survived the purges. Academics live this strangely dangerous life. We go, hey, isn't it great? As an academic, you have tenure, you have job security. And that's what it looks like from the outside. Often, academics have very insecure jobs. They often go on short-term contracts. It only takes a change of government for them to say, you spent 20 years studying this, but we're going to go in this direction. That's not interesting to us anymore. Your funding is cut. Go do something else. You're unqualified for anything that we now care about. Or a change in the focus on the funding agency. Or a different government comes to power and decides to purge the academics. It happens. And Daniel understood this. Then Daniel went home and informed his friends of the matter, and he asked them to pray for mercy to the God of heaven concerning this mystery. Okay, it is okay as academics to pray about the issues you are facing. It is okay as a church to ask academics what they want prayer for. And they may not say, I've got these two friends that I'd really like to become saved, please pray for their salvation. They might say, I don't understand this fourth order differential equation that I'm trying to solve. And you go, how do you care about that when there are unsaved people? Well, they do care about that. Pray for them. And as an academic, both the academics in the room and those online, this is something I realized. Franz Olivier in London, who back in the day was a campus pastor, and I had this problem in the lab and I couldn't solve it, and I was wrestling with it, and he said, have you prayed about it? And I'm like, no, I'm a scientist. I don't pray for revelation that I understand my experiment. I need to fix the bug. And he's like, you need to understand how it works at the end, right? But if the bug is just messing things up, why don't you pray that you understand what the bug is? Then you can flip the right switch and get the results you want. Changed my life. Academics, pray for your experiments. Then, in the night, a vision of the mystery was revealed to Daniel. I'm not going to discuss this. I'm going to skip over it. But I put up the picture so I can say I've put it up. Good. So the king's deputy quickly ushered Daniel into the king's presence. This is one of the awesome things about being an academic. Most people, you're trying to get people's attention. You want to change the world. You want to make the world different. You see all the weird things going on. You're like, if only someone would listen. I filled in 100 online petitions, and no one responds to them. Hey, we've got this many signatures. They have to discuss it in Parliament, and they discuss it in Parliament, and they go, well, we're not going to do anything. And you go, what am I doing? Academics do not have this problem. Academics have the problem that they get a phone call and they get told, Westminster now. If you should doubt me, when a pandemic happened, and this particular ruler was concerned and could not sleep, as you can see, right? He didn't ask Avaz what to do, right? He called on Professor Patrick Vallance and Professor Chris Whitty. And they weren't invited to offer opinions, they were instructed to tell the politicians what to do. Wouldn't it be great if Christian academics were in a position where they can say, you're asking me what to do, let me tell you. Okay, I'm going to skip over chapter 3. Sorry, need to keep it roughly within time. So I've mentioned at various points this idea of being in these two camps. How do we reconcile that? Daniel was a Hebrew, right, of the tribe of Judah, and yet he was trained as an astrologer, magician, and diviner. Nebuchadnezzar, now we flip, we're in first person. Nebuchadnezzar's telling the story. I, Nebuchadnezzar, was relaxing in my home, living luxuriously in my palace, and I saw a dream that frightened me. Later, Daniel, whose name is Belteshazzar, named after my God, and in whom there is the spirit of the holy gods, I recounted the dream for him as well, saying, Belteshazzar, chief of the magicians, in whom I know there is a spirit of the holy gods, and whom no mystery baffles, consider my dream that I saw and set forth its interpretation. Now, there's so many things here that Daniel could get bent out of shape about. Right? His name Daniel means God is my judge. Belteshazzar is referring to Marduk, patron god of Babylonia. Often not called Marduk, he was often called Bel, which means Lord, a name that has been assigned to other gods. Belteshazzar means the Lord is my protector. So not only has he been ripped out of his context and placed in a Babylonian context and given a different identity, it is a really, really problematic identity. And every time someone talks to him, this is what he is reminded of. Nebuchadnezzar the king says, my God is your protector, tell me what I'm going to do. And Nebuchadnezzar's kind of got something, right? Daniel has the Spirit of God in him, and Nebuchadnezzar says, in whom there is a spirit of the holy gods. Now, Daniel could pick up on this and go, okay, but let's just get some ground rules first. When I explain this, right, try and understand. As an academic, we're faced with this question. We're faced with strongly anti-godly ideas, and we're like, okay, what do I address first? That takes wisdom. That takes humility. That takes courage. You don't always get it right. When an academic does something, says something, doesn't pick someone up on something that you think that's the first thing they should have addressed, have grace for them. This is a problem they face every day, every conversation. Where do I twist the knife? Okay. But Nebuchadnezzar explained the dream. He said, here are the visions of my mind while I was on my bed. While I was watching, there was a tree at the center of the world. It was enormously tall. The tree grew large and strong. Its top reached into the sky, and it could be seen to the ends of the earth. And while I was watching in my mind's vision on my bed, a holy messenger came down from heaven. He called out loudly as follows, chop down the tree and lop off its branches, but leave its stump in the ground. This decision is by the pronouncement of the holy ones, so that those who are alive may understand that the Most High has authority over every kingdom on earth. Right? Big tree, reached to heaven, got chopped down by instruction of the Most High. This is our dream. Now you, Belteshazzar, declare its interpretation, for none of the wise men in my kingdom are able to make known to me its interpretation. But you can do so, for the spirit of the holy gods is in you. Now, first of all, it's worth noting, this statement is not quite true. Sort of true. Probably every single one of the wise men in the country could interpret the dream. Strictly were able to. None of them were willing to say the interpretation out loud to the face of the king. Because the interpretation, if you understand Babylonian cosmology, is stonkingly obvious. Now, Babylonian cosmology. Daniel did not come from a Babylonian system. He came from a Hebrew system. Now, he if you look at the times, he probably would have read Isaiah. He knew Isaiah. It existed as a text already. And we see dreams of trees being cut down. Behold, the Lord God of hosts will lop the branches with terrifying power. And the great height, or the high ones, will be hewn down, and the lofty will be brought low, and there will come forth a shoot from the stump of Jesse. A branch from its roots shall bear fruit, and the Spirit of the Lord shall rest upon him, the Spirit of wisdom and understanding, the Spirit of counsel and might, the Spirit of knowledge, of fear of the Lord. Now, for an academic, if I ever get a chance to share this, this is wonderful. This is like an academic's dream prophecy. It's a messianic prophecy. How does it describe Jesus, Christ, our Messiah, our Savior, a spirit of wisdom, understanding? Yes, when I get made more Christ-like as an academic, this is a dream, right? But this is Daniel's culture. And Daniel recognizes that his cultural picture of what trees are about isn't going to connect with Babylon. This is the prophecy he's got. Now, in Babylonian mythology, a tree that reaches between heaven and earth, there is only one interpretation for that. That's the king. The king is the connection between heaven and earth, with its roots going into the underworld. He is the axis through which the realms of heaven and earth and the underworld are connected. And this big, mighty king that can be seen from the ends of the earth, there is only one person this tree can refer to, and it is Nebuchadnezzar. And Daniel knows that. Now, the other Babylon wise men know that because they're Babylonians. Daniel knows that because he has been trained in Babylonian language and literature. If he turned up and he said, you know what, I was busy reading my Bible, I didn't bother to understand your culture and your literature, God could have revealed the meaning to him supernaturally by some direct revelation, would have worked, but probably Daniel knew this because he'd been trained in the culture. When we could go to university and we could say, okay, you care about all of these things, feminism and liberalism and genderqueer studies and whatever you want, and freedom and success and economics, but I'm going to read my Bible. Right? No. If the world wants to talk about these things, if that's the language they speak, if that's the categories they have, learn those categories. Speak in those categories. Certainly as an academic, this is what I have to do as my daily job. So the tree at the center of the world is Nebuchadnezzar. Now this is a Babylonian idea, but here's now the magic of Daniel. He inserts himself into the Babylonian mindset, and he gently subverts everything. If a Babylonian had been here, they would have sat in the Babylonian mindset, but thanks be to God, Daniel had a foot in each camp. So he's learned the Babylonian mindset. And yet he says, the Most High is a really weird concept for Babylonians because they don't have a high God. You've got Marduk, who's kind of powerful. You've got Anu, who's also kind of powerful, father of the gods. You've got multiple gods. You've got a pantheon who kind of fight with each other, and depending on which season you're in, different ones win. There is no Most High God. Now, Marduk being the god of Babylonia, that city, and the patron god of Nebuchadnezzar, when Nebuchadnezzar says this, he probably thought the Most High God was Marduk, the god after whom Daniel was named, Belteshazzar, the god who gave Daniel his protection. Now, Daniel can either, he's like, I'm going to just adopt a Babylonian view. Here, he kind of leaves it a little bit more ambiguous. He says, Belteshazzar replied, Sir, if only the dream of your enemies and its interpretation applied to your advisors. The tree is you. That's normal for Babylonians. That was actually no surprise to Nebuchadnezzar. The dream disturbed him exactly because he knew the tree was him. 7 periods of time will pass by before you understand that the Most High is ruler over human kingdoms and gives them to whomever he wishes. They said to leave the stump of the tree, for your kingdom will be restored to you when you come to understand that heaven rules. Now, Daniel here could well be using Most High in a Hebrew sense. Or he could be using it in a Babylonian sense. It's kind of ambiguous. He doesn't push Nebuchadnezzar to say, this is my God, not yours. So we've gone from I'm accepting Babylon to I've got this ambiguous thing going on. And you might look at it and you go, hang on, why don't you let the other boot drop? Why don't you get him to accept God? Right? When we're in this negotiation with the world, how do we do this? This takes wisdom. But look at what he says next. Therefore, O king, may my advice be pleasing to you. You asked for an interpretation, and I've given you the interpretation, but now I'm giving you the advice that you didn't ask for, but which I have the ability to give you because I'm standing in your room right now and no one else is. As an academic, I've spent years working my way up to be standing next to you now. You asked for this, and I'm giving you this. And this is the advice he gives. He says, break away from your sins by doing what is right. The Babylonian conception of sin was completely different. It was, have you left balance with heaven? Have you followed the appropriate cultic rituals? There was no moral notion of sin in Babylon. So Daniel starts using words here. Connection of what is right with abandoning sin is not quite the same. This is a Hebrew idea. Break away from your iniquities by showing mercy to the poor. The king can do what he wants. There is no reason at all why a powerful person should show mercy to the weak and the poor. This is right against Babylonian thinking. But Daniel, who stands across these two cultures, comes from here and gently drags the king over here. Perhaps your prosperity will be prolonged. In the interest of time, I'm not going to go into the details of why Babylonian views of prosperity and making deals with gods did not align with Hebrew views of prosperity and how we engage with gods. But suffice it to say, all three of these are Daniel bringing Hebrew thought into the king's bedchamber. And he can do it because he's slowly, surely, decade after decade, climbed up to be the king's advisor, the most powerful of all the magicians and astrologers. And he's accepted that title. He wears the turban and the robes. He looks like a Babylonian. He understands the Babylonian culture. He accepts, okay, this tree is you, I'm going with that. And I will gently, straddling two cultures as I do, I'm going to walk you over here and I'm going to bring God's message to you. So, to bring this into what happens now, if I walk into a campus now and I use a word like love, when governments speak about love, when lawyers speak about love, when they're making laws about, love is love, when students speak about love, when Christians speak about love, we have different ideas. Now, Babylonians and Hebrews viewed trees differently. They viewed sin differently. They viewed the poor differently. Using the same words does not mean that you're using the same ideas. As an academic, I have to wonder, do I use their words to mean their thing? Do I subvert it and use their word to mean something else? And you might look at it and you go, hey, this is the hill that you die on. And an academic needs the wisdom to say, maybe it is. Maybe it isn't. They need the knowledge to be able to say, this is a word that other people are using differently. And if I just say the things that I would say in church, it will make no sense. Like if I talk about the stump of Jesse, Nebuchadnezzar has no idea what I'm on about. Joy. A Christian view of joy and the world's view of joy is not the same. Or peace. When you are talking about a peace treaty in the Middle East, a Christian view of what peace looks like is not just a tweak around the edges. It's not a slight change of what that would look like. It utterly subverts every single category that exists in the discussion. And you can say, well, as a Christian, the Bible is clear. Right? Well, perspicuity, the Bible is clear. I just read it. I believe it. That settles it. The task of an academic is to say, I am straddling two worlds, and I need to understand both worlds, and I need wisdom to negotiate between these. Kindness. Our view of kindness and the world's view of kindness are not the same. Justice, oh my word. Hope. All of these words Christians use and the world uses. And we use them in different amounts, but we also use them to mean radically different things. And as an academic in a secular university, I have the responsibility to understand how the words are used in academic discourse. I have a responsibility to understand how they are used in Christian biblical discourse. And I have a responsibility to pray really, really hard for the wisdom and discernment and insight and understanding to work out what to do faced with these two sets of discussions. Very briefly, to take one of those words and one of these topics, success, right? Education Secretary targets behaviour and attendance crisis. What does success mean for a child's education? A Christian, hopefully, will disagree about the meaning of the word success with the Education Secretary. That's a whole other sermon. There's like 7, so each word applied to each of these stories would be a whole other sermon. What does success mean? What does effectiveness mean when it comes to AI and history? What does joy mean when, right? What does joy mean when you have concerns over the hidden crisis of suicide among new fathers? What does success mean in fatherhood? What does success mean in addressing suicide among young fathers? Right? Christians have a view of success, and it's not the same as the world's view. And to bridge these two and to have this discussion takes years and years and years of thinking it through and reading into the literature. Wouldn't it be great if we had Christian academics that could and did do that? So, final thing, how can the church be involved? Ha. 1, encouragement. Daniel's task was important. It really, really was. Often Christians say, academics, like students, they go to university to learn something and then they go into the real world and do real jobs. Academics, they just sit reading books. I don't know what they do. Do something useful with your life. Leave the university and go and do something, right? Often people in the church don't understand that what academics are doing is really important. If you find an academic, encourage them. Prayer. Daniel needed prayer support. If you find an academic, pray for them. And don't just, pray that you bring down strongholds that set themselves up against the knowledge of God, right? No. Pray for wisdom and insight and discernment. Pray for these things that are important to academics, even if you don't understand why. Discipleship. Now, so this one everyone can do. This one probably everyone can do. Hopefully everyone can do. This one, this one's really fun. Not everyone can do this, but this is something the church needs to do. I don't know how Daniel managed to bridge these worlds. I don't know who trained him, who taught him. But if we have academics who are in this world, who are bridging this gap, as Daniel did, wouldn't it be awesome if we could say, your discipleship is not just discipleship about, the normal purple book stuff. There's this stuff that you need to know as a basic Christian, but you have a very particular calling, and you need to be able to engage with this. And that is part of your Christian discipleship. And the church should engage with academics and say, let's talk about what it means to think Christianly about politics, about economics, about social theory, about art history, about science, about AI. Oh, there you go. Thank you very much.
Wow.